I screwed up the best intro, flat out, period. And it sucks because, yeah, I got really excited and then I screwed it up. It's, yeah, I am sad. I am very, very sad. Let's see. Okay. You can't hear me now, can you? There we go. And maybe? Maybe? Okay. Yeah, there we go. So I literally clicked over and I was like, for 1,000 years I have lain dormant. Who has summoned me? And then I looked down and I was like, oh, hey, fan. Damn it. I'm not a sister of silence. I just have issues. Anyhow. Alright, so. Um. Episode 37. We're here for it. We're ready for it. It's going to be good times. Okay. So, let me see something real quick. Thank you, Hobbit. Hobbit said, Commissar, that man there, the so-called prophet. Alright. So, I need to check and make sure that this is okay, and it's not. So I'm just going to do this real quick. Make sure that this goes right. Bam, there we go. Okay, we're good to go. And we're ready to start. When I react to SCP-053, you watch SCP Orientation 53, SCP Illustrated 628 versus 53, and SCP Explained Story Animate. Jesus, that is a lot. Yes, Warden, good times does rhyme with war crimes. So how's everybody doing? You know? Is everybody happy? Does everybody feel good about what's going on today? Alright. So, it is time to do the dance. Yes, it is. It is. Okay. Yay. I am steadily working through the request for reactions list, a bit at a time. Trying to work my way through it slowly, doing about 3 to 4 a day. Once I get it down to a little bit more manageable, gonna be going good. Glad to see it, Decolonius. Thank you, Ricky. I hope you pay special attention to the art in this episode. Some of it is AI-generated art. Yeah, I actually started to try to play around with some of that, but I just suck with that. And it is what it is when it comes to me being terrible at something. It's just what I can do. I tried around with Mumbo a little bit ago, and I tried with there was a couple of other types of AI programs that I was taking a look at, but I haven't had time to really sit down and get into them. In any case, who is ready for episode 37? X's in chat on your refurbished buttons, guys. The AI art provided by Midjourney. I have to figure out how to work that. I have to figure out how to work it. Oh, jeez. I would love it. Yeah. Antikira, AI-generated art is sometimes scary by looking a bit too human. Yes, it is very scary sometimes. Comrade Dog is here. This Scheissner Nilsson is here. Lord Admiral Even Salt, Mr. Reich. Lord Tybalt at the Blood Angels. Omega's here. The wife is here. Just a Doc is here. Graydon Hicks is here. The Warden's here. Alistair is here. Wow. Pablo is here. In SpongeBob voice, Tony Vool is here. The fan is here, of course. Antikira is here. Jackson Eagle's here. And the Hobbit is here. He has only the pristine X provided by the text priests. Here we go. And boop.
The rebels were cheering. Hollow displayers flashing and speakers blasting music among the massive, disordered and armed crowd. One of three massive armies composed of local Axumites which had converged on the Basilica battlegrounds. Though they were the farthest away, located near the tail end of the crashed Providence class, the smallest of the three large groups, and the one which had seen the least amount of combat, they still celebrated the victory with audacious vigor. Young men and women fired their weapons skyward.
Haven't you guys learned that hope is the first step on the road to disappointment yet?
Cheering through the beating, thumping music. Others danced in the streets, exalting the end of the imperial occupation. Many of the older members of the crowd busied themselves guarding the scores of captured imperial prisoners they had taken. A few walking about and distributing the confiscated weapons to those who needed or wanted them. What combat there had been had not lasted long, and under the leadership of the man who had rallied and brought them here, victory had been rapid and relatively bloodless. Though only a quarter of those present were aware of the fact that, had it not been for this figure, they would have wound up aimlessly wandering around the streets of Axum like so many other mobs which had taken to the city. But no less would have been expected of him, for the common word among the masses was that this man was a Jedi. That was what Sando had been sent to find out. Himself and 9 other clones having been sent by Master Obi-Wan Kenobi to discover the truth, and if the man was of the Order, to reconnect him with the command structure. But as the clones were rapidly discovering, finding any one person in this mess was nearly impossible.
Yep.
They formed a loose wedge with Sando in the lead, carefully but firmly making their way through the crowd as they searched for the man matching the description they had been given. At the very least, the rowdy mob was not sore at the sight of them, Sando feeling an out-of-place elation as he navigated through the many young fighters who had come out to support the Republic's liberation of Axum. They cheered even more loudly as he and his brothers came.
You're not there yet. You need to stop dancing and celebrate. You gotta finish the job first.
Came into sight, thanking them as they passed, slapping their backs and shoulders, all smiling while they jostled the clones with their gratitude. I could get used to this. We're heroes! Upper said into their squad comm, waving and pointing at the crowd around them. Don't let it go to your head, Up. These folks may be smiling now, but the public is fickle as a lightsaber. The moment you get comfortable with all their praise is the moment, Hardway began to say before being cut off in the comm by Sando. Give it a rest, Hardway. After all we've been through today, this is the least that we deserve. Enjoy it while it lasts, he said, shaking hands with one very enthusiastic Bith freedom fighter. They would activate their helmet speakers to ask the crowd questions from time to time, though just being heard through the bleating music was difficult, much less getting back intelligible answers. The floating drone and droid speakers which hovered over their heads blasted out their heavy beats, so loud that Sando's visor trembled in sync with them. Many of these devices also bore flashing lights and projected holograms as they flew and floated over the heads of the Axumites. Saluting troopers, the flag of Axum, the wheel of the Republic, and many words and slogans like freedom, victory, and down with the Imperium floated high or danced low among the jostling crowds. Combined with the smoke all around, which reflected the lights oddly, and the soft thunder coming from the burning sky above, the environment formed itself.
Oh god, somebody get Prophet. He just spoiled the entire thing. It gets worse. Yeah. Yes. It gets a lot worse. I already know what's coming. Hospitaler.
Mm-hmm.
We require the Puglar.
Which one do you want?
The Black Templar.
You want the Black Templar?
The baby Black Templar. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Into an aesthetic which struck Sando as one he would have only expected to find in a fever dream. Like a party held at the end of the universe, the young and the old and all the living, rallying under the dying stars to face the end of time as an army of
Thank you,
one.
Prophet.
He shook his head, refocusing on his task, and turning when he heard someone call for him over the comm. Hey, Sando! I think I got something, said Upper. Sando bowed his head respectfully.
Everybody's
to the
all
person he had been
cheering and
trying to
happy.
speak with, awkwardly breaking away and then doing his best to push past the convulsing, cheering press that stood between him and his brother. When he finally made it, Sando found Upper standing with an Ithorian, the large alien pumping his fist into the air and cheering his own chant of, "For the Republic! For the Republic!" through the loud, head-mounted translation device, which was converting the groans and moans his species could emit into bass.
1 second.
What's
1 second. We now... Give. Okay, now we have company. There we go. Yes. Yes. It always gets worse. Don't worry about it, though. Say hello to everybody. This is my stream watch partner for today. Yes. There you go. Yeah. All right, here we go.
What's up, Up? Sando asked through his comm. This guy here has some interesting intel. Listen. Upper said in response before turning to the cheering alien and tapping his shoulder, getting his attention before switching to his helmet speaker and yelling through the crowd and music. "Tell him what you told me," Upper directed, pointing to Sando and taking a moment to make sure the Ithorian, who seemed certainly intoxicated, understood who he was gesturing towards. The Ithorian rebel nodded his broad head after a moment and came closer to Sando, speaking in a loud, audible voice thanks to the speakers in his translation device. "Your buddy is looking for..."
Thanks, Meep. I think we all are aware the fan is uploaded. I think we're all aware. Thank you. Thanks, Meep.
The boss, right? Well, I don't know where that guy went, but I know that he didn't show up alone. When he came up and found our group, he had a few people with him already, like 2 or 3 who then hung out real close to him.
Thank you, Hobbit. Adeptus Puggus reporting for watch duty. Thank you, Meep. Thank you, Hobbit.
The Ithorian said. So he wasn't alone. He came with more people? Sando asked, the Ithorian flapping his head again in response. Like who? Sando asked.
Mr.
Like
Wright, keep that question for the next time I pause.
The Ithorian said, pointing towards a nearby loose crowd of dancers. Sando squinted at the moving, waving group of various species and styles, all of them swinging their limbs and shaking their bodies as bright, holographic projected lights swept over them in various hues. "Which one?" he asked the alien. "The one that's in black with the blonde hair, the small one," the Ithorian said in response, pointing more intensely as if his long finger could lead the way alone. Following the given description, Sando located the one he was talking about. She was a human woman, or girl perhaps. It was a little hard to tell. She was thin as a whip, her black bodysuit and oversized black trench coat barely disguising that as she danced. Her head was a tangle of mid-length blonde hair, which she waved about without any care as she moved and jerked her body to the beat which surrounded the crowd. The ball-shaped droid above the dancers strobing her with red, green, and white. "So you think she knows where the leader is?" Sando asked. The Ithorian shrugged in response. "I don't know, maybe? She's one of your best bets, I'd bet," he added. Sando nodded his head and extended his hand, taking and shaking the Ithorian's. "Thank you, you've helped a lot," he said to the grateful rebel before turning and angling his way towards the dancing crowd. He cut a path in, drawing a few mild scowls as he walked to where she was, near the center, creating some room for himself. Up close, he could see she was indeed no child, but certainly not entirely well either. The woman looked to be about half.
Oh, this is not probably going to go well. Tony Yule says, I have a bad feeling about this. Yes. And Mr. Reich said, who do I think would win in a fight, Creed or Grand Admiral Thrawn? It's in the name. Creed would win on the ground. Thrawn would win in the skies. That's how it works. That is all how it works. Isn't that right, Pugilar? Yes. That is how this works. Don't mind me, I'm just holding this thing. It's so tiny. You're so tiny. Why are you so tiny? Tell me your secrets. Oh, things are not gonna go well. Nah, I don't know. Thrawn is great, but at the same time, this is going to be a mess. I think Creed would still win on the ground. Thrawn or the lion? The lion! Well, of course. Here we go.
Way to emaciation.
Thank you, Tony.
With dark bags heavy under her eyes. Though she did not quite have hollow cheeks or an overtly sickly pallor, something about her struck the clone as undeniably off. A feeling which doubled when the soldier tapped her shoulder and saw her stark blue eyes open and focus on him. The stare she fixed him with sent shivers down his spine, stunning him long enough for her to begin speaking before he could. I'm kind of dancing right now, the odd blonde said to him, her voice flat and listless. She closed her too bright eyes again and continued her movements.
No, I don't think this is the blank
that she
reading.
had ever actually stopped. Despite looking thin, pale, and sickly, she moved with a coordination and even grace which Sando would have thought beyond someone in such apparently bad health. Then again, what did he really know about those kinds of things? Pushing those thoughts aside, he doubled down his focus on what he had come here for. Right. Sorry to interrupt that activity, ma'am, but I'm looking for someone. And word has it, you may know where he is. Sando said, to no apparent effect, the wisp of a woman continuing to dance and completely ignoring him. Sando frowned. What was her deal? She was the first person he'd seen in this entire crowd who was not beaming smiles at him and trying to clap his back or shake his hand, which was odd enough. But her accent also struck Sando as strange, but familiar at the same time. Where had he heard that tempo of speech before? Well, regardless of where he had heard it before, the one thing he knew was certain was that he was not leaving empty-handed. Hey, Sando said more loudly, reaching out and grabbing her wrist. The blonde's luminous blue eyes flashed open all at once, and her body went rigid. Sando abruptly felt himself fall victim to the same sense one gets when a step on a long, dark staircase is missed. The woman's eyes bored into him, suddenly intense and holding within them the essence of a single word: murder. The thin woman jerked, and Sando staggered back, released from the brief, paralytic instant her eyes had locked him into as he let go of her wrist. Only then did he notice the large shape who had joined them. He was a tall man, built like a bear, his tight green and white work fatigues pulled taut over obvious muscle. Over that, the man wore a black trench coat, holding a bright pink bag in his right hand and grasping the blue-eyed woman's other arm with his left. It was only then that Sando saw that her hand had reached into an inner pocket of her trench coat, clutching something there, but restrained from withdrawing it by the balled fist which had wrapped around her bicep. Both their limbs trembled with strain, thick, bunched muscles somehow struggling against the tight cord of the woman's arm, revealing that her incredibly lithe demeanor belayed a truly terrifying strength. Ease up, Heck. I got your damn sugar, so cut me a break and don't start any more fights. At least, not without my permission, okay? The newcomer said, speaking in a thick, low worker accent. The woman turned to face him in a violent rush, and, in response, the man seemed to try to slap her across the face with the brightly decorated pink bag. The thin blonde woman intercepted the strike with her other hand,
Yes.
now free since Sando had released it, snatching and
This is the Imperial agent.
twisting the bag out of his grip. A sudden grin spreading manically across her pale features as she began to tear at the top of the packaging. Thank you, Sam. She chirped happily as the tall man turned to look at Sando.
Oh, God.
Sando's eyes moved from the woman as she thrust her hand into the bag to the newly arrived man, looking up at him and knowing him instantly for who he was. Samael, I assume? The clone said, extending his hand out. The man reached out with his own arm, clasping the clone with a limb that was lined with bright white scars. He gripped Sando's hand tightly and gave a stiff nod. Yeah, that's me. I assume you're from the Republic, correct? Said the large man, to which Sando nodded back. Aye, sir. I am. I was sent here by Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi
Yes, they
to
need a
verify
lot
the
of
rumors
calories.
that you are a member of the Jedi Order, and to bring you to field command if you are. Sando said, straightening a bit but not saluting yet. The man rubbed the bristling stubble that had been growing over his pale face, flexing his jaw for a moment as he paused to think. Well, I can tell you this. I'm no Jedi, just a man with a keen interest in this fight. But I'll still come with you to your command center, if you'd have me, he said. The man spoke as he reached into his trench coat and drew out a thin white roll
Graydon,
narcotic tube,
this isn't
sticking
one
the
of them.
butt in his mouth and lighting it up with the clink of a metal lighter he flicked open with his other hand. Drawing a deep drag of the stuff, he exhaled a cloud of gray smoke into the air above them. The obscure phantom haze was immediately targeted by the floating droid which was flying over their heads, which projected several colors and images into the drifting cloud. The clone paused to consider for a moment,
I
but
know.
then nodded. You may
right,
not be
these
a
are
Jedi,
awesome.
but if you're head honcho here, then I think it's still for the best if we take you back so the generals can coordinate with you. Did you want to bring anyone else? Sando asked, watching as Samael turned to regard the thin blonde woman behind him. She was crunching and slurping noisily over the bead-like hard candies her thin, gloved hands were shoveling into her mouth.
No, boy.
Though, luckily, the bag she was drawing them out from seemed to be very full. She looked ecstatic, as though the sugar she was devouring was the equivalent to a 5-star meal. And Samael seemed to scoff and shake his head lightly at the antics. Heck, I'm leaving for a while to do some work. I'll be back later. Go find that man we met, Jimson, if you run out of sugar. No fecking fighting, heck. I'm very serious. If you think you need a fight, come find me first. He said, shaking
Thank you, Hobbit. How many lighters does this dude have? Infinite lighters. Infinite.
a finger at his distracted companion, who only nodded and mumbled a vague affirmative in response. Sighing, shaking his head wearily, he turned back to Sando, his hard, dark eyes resting heavily on the clone. All right then, let's go meet your generals.
General Sakilla and Captain Graves. Thank you, Tony. Here's how to create our AI art with Midjourney Imagine prompt. Type whatever you want the AI to create, then put the type of style you want the art to be in. Creative if you want it to be detailed. AR is the aspect ratio. I'm going to have to get into that later tonight. Well, probably tomorrow, I'll be honest with you. Alright, are you ready to go back? You are? You ready to lay down? Okay, let me get this Puglar back with her kin. Yes. Alpha Legion, anyone? Also to note, there is something missing about Samuel's description that will make some heads turn soon. Remember, a Thunder Warrior has passed for a human before. This is true. Tony, I'm really going to have to get into that to try to figure out how to do this the best that I can, because I have a lot of stuff I'd love custom artwork for. Alright, say goodbye to the Puglar for now. Goodbye. Alright, it's time to take you back in there. Alright, here you go.
working on possibly trying to build web games. Yeah.
Sounds good. Oh yeah, yoy. All right, back to it.
Ayla had her eyes closed, her body curled in the back of the transport, sleeping soundly, if uneasily, under the watch of Captain Graves. The clone commando sat on a container full of Bacta rebreathers and medical supplies, most of which had been used up. He had been attached to the 327th Star Corps for nearly the entire war, had served alongside General Sakura countless times, and yet Graves had never seen her this exhausted before.
Fan, you were on those side skin, weren't you? I know. Thank you, Prophet. The pug goes to nibble the toes. I see you are indeed a man of culture.
He had been receiving status updates from the front near the Basilica, but had restrained himself from rousing Ayla to inform her. She needed this sleep more than any of them, especially since he knew that she would insist on taking a personal, hands-on approach to the retrieval of the other Jedi, whether they were secure or in trouble. Captain, 40 minutes until we arrive at their last recorded location. The pilot radioed back to him. Aye, good. Keep us on course, Leadhead. I'll wake the General when we're 10 minutes out. He sent back through the comm in his helmet. Sir, just so you know, there's a storm front coming up on us. Looks like a nasty squall, and it's got
I
a lot
love
of
this
readings
remix.
coming out from it. Might be a chemical storm caused by the fighting, said the pilot. How much will it delay us to go around it? Captain Graves asked. Roughly.
Fan says, it was literally the only image of her meditating that I could find.
"30, maybe 40 minutes. Leadhead responded.
Ricky asks, realistically, how much of the Star Wars galaxy do you think the Imperium forces can conquer with their limited numbers? They could take a sizable chunk. I'd say probably about 5 to 8% of the galaxy they could take and hold. Anything past that, you're looking at just severe numbers issues going anywhere any further than that. Now, as far as the Space Marines go, that's a different story altogether. Thank you, Ricky. I appreciate it, bud.
The commando paused to think, weighing the options in his hands. It had taken them 4 hours just to get out this far, adding 40 minutes on the way there, then another 40 on the way back. Does it look like too much trouble to fly through? He asked. Not at all, sir. I think if we seal up the gunships and use the environmental controls, we should be fine. It's not melting buildings or anything. Leadhead reported back. Okay, then we'll risk it. Fly us through. General Windu demanded we get the rest of the order here as soon as possible, and I don't feel like ticking that Jedi off, said Graves. Wait, exclaimed a voice from behind him. Graves turned his helmed head to regard General Sakura, who now stood, awake and at his side. The captain looked cool and collected from the outside, but all he had managed to do was keep from jumping or wincing at her sudden appearance. Heart bumping in his chest and only slowly calming as the Jedi walked past him and activated the door controls. The enormous wall door of the Lat gunship slid open to the whistling winds outside. Tranquility becoming chaos, a chaos Ayla pushed herself into, hanging out of the ship by one arm and one leg as she angled herself to look into their path and the storm they were approaching. Graves could see it too, or rather, its wide flanks reaching out to either side of the horizon. Something about it twisted his guts. And it wasn't just the odd red coloring of the clouds and rain, but
Oh,
the serpentine
no.
crimson lightning which
Oh,
swam
no.
through both. A moment
Oh.
later, he realized what it was which he found so unnerving. The storm was moving, rushing towards them, even as they rushed towards it. Faster and faster, growing to either side more and more, they approached at what appeared to be a gaining speed. Ayla swung herself back in, face clouded, obviously troubled. General? Captain Graves asked. She snapped her eyes up at him. Order the pilot to go around. I don't want any of our gunships even touching that storm for a moment. She said, Aye, General, but you should know, it will delay a significant... Graves began to say. I don't care. Do it, Captain. She suddenly snapped, eyes wide and shot through with red veins. Graves snapped a hard salute and tapped his helmet comm in response. Led, bring us about. Signal all the other gunships to follow us. The General wants us to go around the storm, with a special emphasis on not touching it. Copy that? He said. Copy, Graves. Course correcting now. The pilot calmed back, banking their gunship as Graves went to close the door, but was held up by the outstretched hand of Ayla Sakura. Before them, they could clearly see the storm, whipping and whirling wickedly, the sheets of rain and streaks of rotting red lightning almost appearing to outline odd, horrific shapes amid the chaotic downpour.
Oh,
it hurt the clone's
no.
eyes just to stare into it at all. But the General did not even blink, her own eyes wide and swirling with the reflections of the tempest before them. She muttered something, and Graves stepped forward. What was that, General? He asked into the wind. She did not turn to regard him as she answered, nearly breathless, but audible. I've seen this storm before, she said in a
Yes, there be a shitstorm a brewing, lads.
shuddering whisper. Graves knew not how he heard her, but he did. Where? Graves called, but she did not answer this time, though he could see that, whatever the answer was, it was wreaking havoc behind her eyes. Vague, repressed memories she had only recently burned away began to swell behind the fabric of her mind, burgeoning and growing like horrific, hidden tumors among her thoughts.
Ronnie, the answer to that question, I really don't know. It's a very bad sign. Omega says thank you, Omega. Omega says the dark gods have come to action. Time to board the note train to fuck that town. Yes, it is.
Ayla had seen this storm before.
Oh,
had seen it
God.
from inside, but not with her own eyes. This was one of the memories that the Inquisitor she had faced had forced into her brain, choking her with segments of his own fell existence, and his encounter with this storm had been one of the strangulating fingers he had used to overwhelm her.
Yeah.
The Jedi Master staggered, leaning against the side of the open door, one hand reaching up to cradle her head. From within her pulsing, aching skull, a hailing storm of repressed memories were welling, seeking to break free and gradually succeeding. The lapses in her defenses allowed some of those damaging moments to re-enter her thoughts, like titans slipping their chains to invade the sanctum of her mind.
Oh, well, they're going to be
All
free to
the
do something
while,
else soon.
She was assailed from without by a cacophony of psychic voices, unending howls and screams from beasts and monsters far beyond her ken and
Oh, my
knowledge.
God.
The Jedi had hoped to stave this moment off, at least until the current battle was concluded. But her proximity to this storm, whatever it was, had forced the confrontation between herself and her flash-burned thoughts to occur much sooner than she had anticipated. Keep us clear of the storm and on the path for the mission,
Yep.
Ayla said as she closed the door herself, straightening as she pressed the button and walked on shaky legs to the back of the transport, sitting and crossing her legs.
It's about to go bad.
I will be unable to command for a time. Until I awaken from this myself, I am not to be disturbed. And you are in command until I resume my post. Understood? She would ask as she straightened her back. Aye, General. Good luck. he said with a nod. She smiled briefly, but then stiffened her features and closed her eyes.
Oh, God,
And
they're all
then
screwed.
she opened her mind, and every box she had sealed within. It was at last time she reckoned with the darkness that foul Imperial had thrown over her. And here, guarded by her clones and away from the din of battle, she knew she had a better chance at victory against it. A better chance, but she also knew there was no certainty. Taking a breath
you're
in,
screwed.
she recalled the words of Master Yoda, and slowly
Have not taken enough ketamine, you have. To deal with this, you must.
released her held breath in the form of a whispered mantra. Do or do not, she muttered. There is no try.
Here we go.
Combier's head was pounding, his body feeling sick, aching all over, but from a few particular places with specifically agonizing pains. He blinked, glad he had been wearing his helmet, and untangled himself from the wreckage he was surrounded by. The armored Axumite tried to remember what had happened to get himself here.
Thank you, Ricky. Ricky asked, do you think the Space Marines should try to create their own founding? They have enough gene seed to do so, and the Mechanicus personnel to do so as well. That's not the problem. The problem is gear. That's the biggest problem they're going to face right now, because they don't have anywhere currently to make new suits of armor. And so that's going to become the first priority problem for them. Once they've solved that, I don't think they'd have a problem doing second and third foundings. Thank you, Ricky.
And, very slowly, his memory began to return to him, gushing slowly back into his thoughts with each pain-ridden beat of his heart. They had been hauling the Providence class, and Javona had been doing something which had allowed them to actually successfully lift the wrecked hulk, with the help of many other ships, all the way to where it was needed. Well, almost all the way. Just as they had entered their final approach, the Imperials had begun returning fire from the ground, and Combier's ship had been one of the many which had been struck out of the sky by their lethal volleys. He could hear the ghostly sound of the screaming alarms, now all silent, could remember the sound of his mother's panicked voice as she warned them all to brace for impact. Their ship being torn to ribbons by a cascade of flak fire which quickly overwhelmed their civilian shields. They toppled end over end out of the air, engines combusting as they did and flinging the freighter further, faster, their ship smashing into the ground and flipping like a coin. Meanwhile, they were trapped inside the tumbling and turning vessel, everything ripping apart around them as Combier, Venora, and Javona were tossed and thrown about in their chair.
Okay, seriously, hold on a second. Prophet says, he regrets to inform me that the chat and fan stream kept calling Javona, the Gussie. Purge the heretics. Prophet, that is legitimately you saying that. Like, self-reflection, any at all. Just, please.
Everything came to a jarring, violent halt once the ship finally crashed to a smoking rest, less than 300 meters from the Basilica gates. His own chair had come entirely loose of the floor at some point, leaving Combier covered in metallic detritus and sitting at an awkward angle. The young Axumite heir knew not how long he had languished there, unconscious and immobile within the burning wreckage of his family's ship. But he did know enough to guess that it was probably for too long. He carefully pulled himself free of the chair he had been bound to, and the wreckage which pinned him, finding that his armor had protected his body against most things, but it had done comparatively little to shield him from the impacts he had suffered during the crash. That being the case, however, he had to admit that he was very lucky to be alive. And that was luck that he soon discovered was not shared by everyone else. Combeer felt his heart freeze in his chest as his eyes looked up to see the bloody remains of his mother.
Oh,
Her body
damn.
pummeled and twisted, her armor having been far less able to resist than Combeer's own. Panic flooded his veins in a cool, soul-crushing rush. He crawled over to her, frantic and suddenly unheeding of his own injuries. No, no, no! He begged,
Effing chat for
but he had
mom.
no gods to hear him, and none did as he cradled her shattered body. Her neck was clearly broken. Her skull caved in on one side. Unlike Combeer, she had not been able to get her helmet on in time.
Alright. Hold on. I gotta deal with something now. Thank you, Hobbit. Commissar, please nuke chat. My eyes are burning. X is in chat to nuke yourselves, and you should feel very ashamed of what you have done here.
Clutched her to him, shaking, sobbing into the moist confines of his armor, tears raining into it and filtered out by the helmet's internal drain. He held her as though he could somehow pull her out of death's maw, reverse time, and rip them back into the sky before they had been shot down. But,
Brayden, they'll
of
never
course, this was impossible. And more, the horrid truth sank its teeth into him as reality dragged him forward. The wreckage shook and trembled around him, and Combeer slowly became aware of the sounds of battle being waged just outside and around it. Had they been there all along, or were they just recently arrived? The Axumite could not tell one way or the other, but
Launch the
decided
fish,
the last
Ronnie.
thing he wanted to do was die here as well. He carefully laid Venora's body down amidst the remains of the ship, closing her eyes and crossing her hands over her chest, taking one last moment to mourn his mother before forcing himself to move on. "Goodbye, Mom," he whispered, barely able to keep himself together through the words, turning away before he collapsed again. He was not looking forward to seeing what was left of Javona, but he knew he could not leave without at least checking on her first, though she had been the least armored of all of them. What he found in place of what he expected stole the breath out of his lungs. Javona was curled up, eyes closed, arms hugging her knees as she floated in the air.
Oh, lovely.
Around her in a rough sphere was the crumpled and repelled pieces of various ship debris, which had threatened to crush her. The woman at its center, however, appeared untouched.
Lovely.
"Javona?" Combeer asked hesitantly. Her eyes flashed open, and as they did, the effect seemed to suddenly end, floating pieces of metal and wreckage suddenly falling around her, as did she herself, collapsing with a surprised squeak from her place in the air and into the flattened seats beneath her. Combeer scrambled forward, reaching her wavering form and helping her sit upright. "Holy criffing criff! Javona? By the many moons of Viego, how is this possible?" Combeer said, half elated, half disbelieving.
Oh, somebody shoot
Her
it!
eyes seemed to finally focus on his helmet, and she smiled up at him, herself happy to see he had survived the crash. "I prayed for aid, and my gods have sent it," she said feebly, having trouble concentrating, a trickle of bright red blood rolling down from her nose. Combeer felt more chills cut through him, realizing that she was not as unharmed as she first appeared.
Shoot this
carefully
thing!
Gathering her up in his arms, again ignoring his own pain. "Come on, I'm getting us out of here."
No, leave
He
her!
grunted as he picked his way across the wrecked cockpit and into the twisted remains of the rear corridor. Javona nodded weakly and closed her eyes, quickly falling from the conscious world, feeling quite literally burnt out. Combeer laid her down in the passageway, leaving her only to go and retrieve the case which contained his rifle, getting
Excellent
out and
Chattanooga
loading the
Jackson.
rounds he had left into it. When he came back, he determined he could not carry her and wield the weapon at the same time,
Oh,
and
God.
approached the door without her, intent on clearing it before approaching with her in tow. As he made his way through the short, sparking corridor, pushing dangling wires aside and stepping carefully over.
Yeah, Ricky, I actually agree with you on this one. We really need Johnny Cash as I Hurt Myself. Like, we need that. We need Hurt in this for what they're doing.
Over split floor panels and broken grates, he became aware of a sound. It was an odd, scraping,
Don't remind me.
grinding noise
Don't
that
remind me,
got
Olsen.
louder and louder the closer he came to the doors. Suddenly, those wide, unfolding gates of Durasteel were torn entirely off, yanked free by chains which had been hauled upon with an incredible force. He fell away, almost thrown back by the force of his shock, and scrambled out a hasty retreat on his elbows and heels as the young Axumite fumbled with his rifle. A spray of bright las beams seared the air over his head as guardsmen from outside fired into the tilted wreckage. And had Combeer still been standing,
Shoot
he
the
would have been
thing.
victim to most of them. Following that volley, 4 men charged the entrance, each of them dressed in glossy red and black suits composed of some kind of rubberized material, and each hefting a bayoneted gun. Combeer
Yes.
snapped off a shot from his ancient
These are the
Ripper rifle,
Untouchables.
and the spike it fired scored dead center down the passageway, puncturing and throwing back 3 of the 4 men with ludicrous ease. The old Mandalorian weapon tossed the soldiers away like weighted harpoons, throwing the Imperials even as they began to disintegrate into ashes from where they had been wounded. But one yet remained, and he seemed not to mind the fate of his fellows in the least as he angled his rifle down and speared heated agony across Combeer's body. The advanced armor once more saved his life, reducing what would have been a myriad of fatal wounds to several first and second degree burns scattered over his chest and stomach. He hissed in pain, but that did not stop him from reorienting his long gun barrel and firing his next shot, which flew wide as the Imperial soldier kicked the barrel high, jerking the whole gun out of Combeer's hands.
Combeer, believe me, this is for your own good. You don't know your girlfriend's reputation. You don't run in the right circles to know how dangerous that thing is. Thank you, Hobbit. This is Halo and Republic Commando soundtracks. I like it. I like all this music. Tony Yule says, "Okay, boss, it's about to get fucking worse." Yes, it is going to
Moving
get
with
worse.
the instincts of a Force sensitive, Combeer did not even hesitate, reaching down with his now free right hand and snagging his blaster pistol out from its holster at his side, all the while clamping around the legs of the faceless Imperial with his own and rolling. The maneuver threw the soldier down to the ground just as Combeer drew his sidearm, twisting to shoot at the imp who had fallen on top of him. His shot scorched and punctured the man's left hand, forcing the fully suited soldier to relinquish his gun as he used his remaining hand to grab Combeer's weapon, wrestling with him, both men grunting and gasping as they fought for control of the pistol. But even one-armed, the Imperial soldier was exceptionally strong.
Yeah.
And Combeer found himself losing the contest. He elbowed the imp with the hard end of his armored arm, connecting with the glossy visor of the enemy's hazmat-like suit, leaving a long,
She's not gonna
thin
die.
track along it.
I have no
Combeer
hope she's
grit
gonna
his
die.
teeth and hit him again and again, crying out in frustrated rage as his fingers were pried away from his blaster. He triggered the safety on the weapon just before he relinquished it, pulling himself close to the dark form above him and reaching to grab the Imperial sidearm. The imp growled an inhuman noise of triumph as it wrenched the gun forward,
Do so, Ronnie.
pressing it against Combeer's stomach and pulling the trigger. The blaster did nothing,
Oh,
its
okay.
safety glowing instead as
Oh,
Combeer
lovely.
elbowed him one more time in the face, shattering the panel of hardened glass there, revealing reddened monster's eyes. The imp reared away, a muffled howl tearing out of him in fury. The movement allowing Combeer to yank free the soldier's
Amogus.
own gun, firing the last pistol he now held clutched in his hand, shooting from the hip and into the inhuman Imperial's partially revealed
Damn
face.
it.
Brains burnt to a crisp. The Imperial stumbled and
Mikazushi says, "Get the Martian priesthood on the Vox. We need to commission them to build that boy an adamantium chastity belt." No. It's a done deal. He's screwed no matter what. He's just screwed no matter what. We can't help him out. There's nothing we can do. Just nuke the site from orbit. Thank you, Mika. I'm just going to call you Mika because I don't want to mess up your name. Thank you, bud. I appreciate it.
fell back off of Combeer, revealing in the process of his collapse that the Axumite was far from done with the fight. A large shadow loomed tall over the light of the outside, blocking the way
No,
with
it
her
won't.
hissing, powered armor. Combeer flinched back as she stomped into the cramped place.
Yes.
The Imperial Priestess of War hefting a bulky weapon.
Yes.
She growled something as a pilot light flicked on at the end of the huge alien gun.
Yes.
And Combeer had just enough time to shield himself with his arms before a storm of fire was expelled out towards him. The heat scorched him, but though it hurt like a sunburn, it was not half as bad as he had expected. Opening his eyes, he saw why, as Javona stepped over his prone body, suddenly risen once more and extending her hand out as her power split and repelled the jets of hungry flame. Sweat poured off her head as small burns began to form all across her reaching arm. And without gawking for too long, Combeer reoriented his stolen las pistol and fired it into the muzzle of the flame-throwing weapon. The Imperial sister spat a curse in her language, ceasing her assault and contemptuously tossing the wounded flamer aside, moments before it combusted, coating half her armor in oily tongues of persistent fire, none of which seemed to affect or bother her at all as she withdrew a power maul from her belt. With a snap of her wrist, its haft extended down, its round, spiked head sparking eagerly. Combeer felt his face drain of all blood as the woman approached, his counterfire pinging and burning ineffectively off her armored body. She kicked him hard, knocking all of the air out of his lungs and bruising his ribs as she raised.
Look, the guy lost his father, he lost his mother. I think we just need to do the right thing here and reunite them.
Used her power maul to strike Javona. The insane sister of the Imperial Faith wholly focused on her now. The bald woman recoiled in sudden fear, extending both hands to shove the encroaching enemy away. But as the invisible force hit the Imperial sister, the boots of her armor sparked and coursed with magnetic power and held her fast to the floor, allowing her to continue her approach. Combeer had blots and spots in his eyes as he scrambled with one arm, trying to reach for his rifle while his other fired wide. Ineffective shots from the las pistol still in his other hand.
The Gene Stealer has to die.
Neither of them could do anything to stop what came next. As quick as lightning, a radiant flash cut across the scene. The spark of a power weapon being deflected, lighting the space. The smell of burning flesh and ceramite filling the air in the aftermath. A shining blade of light, emerald cast and glowing, scythed through the midsection of the attacking sister of battle. Her descending weapon parried by another blade, a short sword of blue light. Growling as she falls, the Imperial...
You would have been a lot happier if she had killed them. You would have been a lot happier if she had killed them. You just screwed yourself. Enjoy being on the menu.
...is torn in half and thrown against the wall, her upper body landing right beside Combeer. The imp slumps, dropping her mace, but with her other hand, she withdraws a wide cylinder, hooking a finger from her newly freed weapon-bearing hand through the metal pin at the top.
Grenade.
Combier's eyes widened to the size of plates as he watched her tense to activate the grenade.
Let's go.
Only to then watch her hand be severed just as she pulled, her wrist falling away from her arm. As the blue blade of light cut through it, the green blade cleaving the woman's helmed face in half and ending her struggle. The figure who rose from the strike wiped his wide, bald head with his free hand, sighing heavily as he retrieved the grenade, shaking the severed, armored limb free, pulling the pin with his thumb, and tossing the explosive outside. The two humming lightsabers, long green and short blue, held in his other two hands. He was dressed in a motley of armor, some pieces scavenged from the Imperials, other parts scavenged from the city or the Republic. His face was strongly built, handsome despite his hair.
F in chat for the real hero of this, that sister that attempted to stop this madness from spreading.
And the scaly crest which rested at its center.
Lovely.
But his most notable features were composed of or on his 3 arms.
Lovely.
Not 2 or 4, but 3. 2 limbs grew out of one shoulder on his right side, and
God.
those seemed almost human, though they were armored in a thick, pale purple carapace which reached from under his sleeves to his wrists.
No.
Bony extensions reaching as far as the man's knuckles. His left arm was singular, yet somehow far less human than the limbs opposite it. Thick with pulsating alien muscles, and even more armored than his other arms, his left hand ended not in a 5-fingered humanoid appendage, but instead terminated in a 4-fingered claw which was tightly wrapped around the handle which sported the short blue blade. The green blade was held in one of his more humanoid limbs, and with the remaining one he reached down, taking Combeer by the arm and
Hell no.
hefting him up. Combeer rose on shaky feet, coughing roughly, chest aching as he did.
Easy there. Check yourself for broken ribs before we go any further.
The bald, 3-armed man said, clapping Combeer's shoulder.
Okay. So, Jackson Eagle has asked me to explain something. Anybody want to know what a gene stealer is? X in chat if you do. I'll pause it and explain this. Yeah, Ronnie, you're very correct on that.
As the grenade he had tossed outside thundered, the voices of several wounded Imperials joining it. His face was aged, but not quite old, yet his pale brown eyes were worn with experience, and his face projected a leader's understanding. Combeer nodded without a word, taking those moments just to pull air back into his recently reinflated lungs.
Okay. Hobbit says, be happy, Combeer has a new family. No, he's not a member of the family yet, but he's about to be as soon as they bring out the Primarch. No, not the Primarch, the Patriarch. Okay, so there's a race in 40k called Tyranids. Now, even as early as the 35th millennium, there was evidence of things called gene stealers. Now, gene stealers are they're basically infiltration. And what they do is they will go to a area and infect the local population. Ricky says, welcome to the family, kid. Very true, Ricky. Now, these gene stealers don't really know what they are. They seldom know what they actually are. Oftentimes, gene stealers will be just as confused, and like they'll be involved in pretty much everything that everybody else will. But what gene stealers wind up doing is they wind up getting into places that where power comes from. The whole thing about gene stealers is the longer that they are in a society, the more they breed, because gene stealers will breed like crazy. They'll fuck like rabbits. Any children born after the fact will be part gene stealer, which was basically part Tyranid, and part whatever native species. Now, they keep that genetic information for when the Hive Fleet comes. Generally, gene stealers will be in an area, and they'll infect the local population to a point where they start to basically prepare the population to be defenseless. So there will be gene stealers on the planet for 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years, and no one will know. No one will know. And they start to form something called gene stealer cults. Now, gene stealer cult is a group of gene stealers. Hobbit says, one way or another, they're going to steal your genes. This is true. Now, that's not your standard kind of gene stealer hybrid. I already know, and it's actually quite disturbing. But what happens with the gene stealers is they begin to form kind of a religion, worshiping a great ant in the sky. And at a certain point, they will start to make way for pure breed, pure strain gene stealers. And a pure strain gene stealer, in appearance would, if you've ever seen Resident Evil, the liquor. The best way I can explain that, with 2 extra arms and a lot of chitin. Now, what they will do is, at a certain point, they will start sending a psychic signal out to attract the Hive Fleet to that planet, saying it's ready for conquest. And the second that the Hive Fleet gets close enough, the gene stealers will kick on, saying, "Oh, it's our time now," and they will do everything they can to destabilize the planet before they get there, to leave the planet completely defenseless. That's what these guys are. That's what this group is. The beginnings of a gene stealer cult in the Star Wars universe. And I can tell you right now, the 40K universe finds these guys almost like ridiculously hard to deal with. Star Wars is going to be terminally screwed when it comes to dealing with these, because they're just a different breed. Any case, oh good God. Didn't a pure strain nearly kill the Canoness? Yes, that was a pure strain gene stealer. Oh my God, here we go.
While he did that, the newcomer turned away and moved swiftly to Javona's side, the woman already smiling before he turned to her and jumping for joy into his arms. The man carefully catching and embracing her, watchful of where he angled the lightsabers he held as he did. "Athrazan!" she exclaimed, voice overflowing with elation.
Well, he ain't breeding.
As he spun her in his arms, pressing her head against his, tears beginning to run down her face.
Oh, God.
Yes, it's me, little brood.
Hey, Chris.
It's all right. It's going to be all right.
No, it's not.
He cooed, bringing her around and back to her feet, patting and stroking her back with his free hand as she collapsed into him and wept out of sheer relief.
Fire
"I'm sorry
bomb.
for leaving the hideout. I didn't tell them anything about..." she began to say, but he shushed her again.
It's all okay. We are here for you. We could never abandon you.
The newcomer comforted, holding her tight.
Good God.
But the others, the Imperium, she began to say, pulling away somewhat as she did.
Javona, all that matters is that you are safe.
He said.
Liquai, Jolsop, and myself. None of us are as important as you are. My greatest fear was that I would not reach you in time. With the force required to rescue you, it is a boon and blessing from the gods that you are whole
God.
and safe again.
Javona smiled, rubbing her face against his hand as he ran it along her cheek, closing her teary eyes for a moment before opening them again and looking towards Combeer. "It's all thanks to him," she said, indicating...
Oh my god. Abhuman the Scrug says, if it's not Slaanesh, it's Gene Stealers. The Imperium has servitor real dolls for a reason. That's disgusting. That's more Slaaneshi than Slaaneshi. Why would you say something so horrible? Yet something probably very accurate on a pleasure world. Thank you, Abhuman.
Towards where the Axumite was recovering his rifle, groaning as he bent over and began to check the damage to the old gun.
Guys, F in chat to purge both your stomach and the Xenos.
Bathrazan knew well enough. He turned to follow her eyes and smirked, though not unkindly.
Then I will need to introduce him to the others. If you have chosen him, then he will have a high place among us.
He said more softly.
Oh,
Javona
God.
blushed and looked down, but suddenly catching what he had said, looked back up suddenly. "The others? Did they all come?" Javona asked, surprised. Bathrazan smiled a wide, toothy grin and nodded his large, aged head.
Oh my god. Thank you, Ricky. Ricky asks, since they're in a different galaxy and it will probably take a long time for the Tyrians to get there, thousands of years, how big of a Gene Stealer cult do they get with all the extra time? Considering the way the Star Wars galaxy does not know what they are, Gene Stealers will not reveal themselves willingly under any circumstances. They try their best to blend in with the society, but considering how open Star Wars galaxy is to this, if the Imperium was defeated, the Gene Stealers could take over the entirety of the galaxy, and the second that they got prepared to actually turn on everyone else in it, it would be too late for anyone in there to actually do anything about it. It would be absolutely... It would be more one-sided than the Imperium versus the Star Wars galaxy, with the Imperium having Great Crusade levels of Astartes invading all at the same time. It would be more one-sided than that. They wouldn't even need the Hive Fleets. The Gene Stealers could conquer the Star Wars galaxy from within by themselves and make Creamy She look like a child in comparison. Let's see. Yeah, there are a few hive minds in Star Wars, but nothing with this level of rapaciousness. Thank you, Ricky. Mega says, Demon Host and Gene Stealer cults. Axiom is like what we like to call a lost cause. No, it's like it's what we like to call an expanding asteroid field. Thank you, Omega. If these fuckers get off planet, the galaxy is doomed. You better believe it. Fan, you should have shown Shakira meditating after
Yes, Josop brought them all. All the new converts and many, many more.
Creamy She Stealer.
Jaw wants to use them to completely destroy the Imperials on this planet.
He said,
Of course he
souring
does.
slightly at the end. "And you? What do you want now?" she would ask him. Bathrazan straightened with a sigh and began to face Combeer, readying to welcome him more formally as he sensed the Axumite would soon be joining his family.
You know me, Javona. I am a preserver. I just want to save those I can and get them away from the death camps.
Yeah.
Like you. And maybe like him too.
Oh, God. Why? Why can't we have nice things like nukes and virus bombs on Axiom right now? Let's go.
Bang.
Alright, here we go. I'm actually going to mute this because I don't want to get a copyright hit. I've gotten 4 separate copyright hits this week. I'm getting slapped around. Breaking a QA to enjoy. X to turn Axiom into Dawn of War 4. Let's do it. Zelvin asked, the Imperium's move to decapitate the Confederacy was an astounding success, but I've noticed something weird about it. The mission started from Raxus, and on the greatest extent we have seen, they went to the opposite end of the galaxy, a Hypori. The issue is travel time. Warp travel isn't slow, but it takes a lot longer for them to cross massive distances, so how fast can the Imperium travel? Based on episode 31, it sounded like it was at least a week to travel from Raxus to Hyperion. Hypori. Is this correct? Now, warp travel is in 40K is slow specifically because of how absolutely the main reason it's so slow in 40K is because of how turbulent the warp is. If the warp wasn't so turbulent, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. And the warp travel would actually be pretty fast and extremely reliable. Here we go. There is a planet cracker on Axon right now. Yeah. Tony Vull, thank you, bud. He says, I guess calling the occupation of Axon and changing the name to New Cadium may be a curse. Maybe. We don't know. It is faster in Star Wars. It's definitely faster in Star Wars, though. Alright, let's see what Fan had to say. Indeed, your estimate is more or less correct, which is part of what led to Grievous's overall advantage. It took the Crimson Razors weeks to reach as far as Hypori, giving the good General plenty of time to review data and prepare an appropriate welcome. But yes, by the time they had arrived, General Grievous was already well aware of their likely intentions. Like many intelligence-based characters, giving Grievous prep time is worse than foolish. Now, here's the fun part for me. Knowing that, Captain Chainsaw with, oh wow, Grievous, I need him back in this story just to see how nightmarish he is. Samurai Bear says, interesting side lore, both Jedi and Sith refuse to train hive mind race out of fear, wondering how the Jedi will react to the Gene Stealers. I don't know how they're going to react. Lord Invictus says, are any Jedi going to enter a oneness state when they do in Legends? Is shown to boost their power levels to degrees without clear ceilings. Jake and Solo, for example, was implied to be able to impose his will on reality when fighting Onimi, albeit to do so would undercut how he achieved it to start with. Similar instances have occurred elsewhere, though without Jacyn's lightsaber state. Yeah, the Imperials have found a new sensation, a smooth ride. I have no answer for this. I have no thoughts on this. See what Fan had to say. Oneness with the Force is possible, but very difficult. However, doing so can grant a person the powers of a greater demon, and even more. It is enough power to break a world or several. It is enough power to sing godlike. In fact, if you ask the dear spirit of Ganner, he will be the first to tell you. It's enough power to become the god of Hell's Gates themselves. If one can do it correctly, that is. Yes. Well, let's see. We're almost near end? No, we're never near the end. We're never near the end, Tony. It's never the end. It's always this close. Alright, so let's see. Road97 says, will we eventually see how Maul and his forces react to the Imperium attack on the Star Wars galaxy? With pants filled with shit, most likely. Because this is an ass-pounding. Quipper says, react to the gods are dead by Vox in the Void when you get the chance. Quipper, I'm actually going to be doing the entire series. I just haven't picked a day to sit down and actually... Yes. I love that response. Let's see. Alright, I'm going to pause. I'm going to pause this. I'm going to be doing Vox in the Void. All the gods are dead. I just have not picked a date to do it. I'm going to live stream that because there's 3 episodes of it, and I want to do that. Alright. Lehman Rush talks shit. Isn't that his natural state of affairs? Are there any Mechanicus fleets or ships that cross over with the other Imperials? Since we know there's at least one Imperial Knight, I suspect there is a significant amount of other heavy Mechanicus assets. Maybe even 1 or 2 of their siege engines. We have not seen a Titan yet. A Titan has not touched down. If we had seen a Titan, it would have been nightmare. I don't remember seeing a Mechanicus fleet. And I don't remember one being mentioned yet. Let's see what a fan has to say. Jackson says, I await the day you react to Noman's Get Slayer series. Several Forge Worlds were evacuated from the subsector before leaving. Currently, there are several large independent Adeptus Mechanicus fleets. Their naval assets range from commandeered haulers to fully staffed Arc Mechanicus. Arc Mechanicus are there? One and all are heavily burdened with the many wonders and technologies from the tech priests shepherded from their doomed holy worlds. If there's Arc Mechanicus here, there are Titans in the Star Wars universe right now. There are Titans here. There are definitely Titans here. 110%. And Kubik asks, "How are you?" Old Man Rex, why does the city feel enraged? Why is the mountain moving? Titans are definitely in here. Doing okay. Almost finished with the second issue of my current comic book, Song of Stone, but the real hard work to finish it off begins soon, but I'd rather be working hard than looking for work. This is true. This is very true. I'm trying to get some voice lines back in for the Commissar Story, part 2, 3, part whatever I'm on right now. I'm an idiot. Yeah. I'm in the middle of 3 scripts. Somebody hit me with something heavy. Now let's get back to the show. It's my pleasure to return to today's audio drama presentation of episode 37, Hidden Hunters. Enjoy. Let Titans land on Coruscant. Oh. Omega says when the church starts walking, you better start running. Oh. Prophet says, okay, hold on. Farnus. Prophet says, in America, I go to church, and 40K church go to you. This is very true, Prophet. Thanks, bud.
Farnus groaned feebly, wincing, head throbbing in the darkness. Nerva. He called through a scratchy, dry throat. He could still feel her vaguely behind him, but she was still and silent. The cockpit of the Knight had been crushed just as the night had been. The already cramped space crumpling until Farnus could barely move, and becoming deprived of all light. None of the controls he could reach were responsive to his touch, and it took him what felt like hours to finally properly judge his own physical condition. He had hit his head hard, and was bleeding from a gash somewhere in his hair. He was constricted into a half-standing, half-sitting position which left him leaned far forward, his chest barely able to take a full breath in without touching the pushed-in blank screens and panels of the forward console. He was sure that all his toes were broken, maybe even more of his feet, but he could move them enough to judge that he was not pinched or stuck. There was not enough space for him to turn to closely examine Nerva, but after listening very closely and holding his own breath, he was sure he was able to confirm to himself that she was still alive, still breathing, just unconscious. That was the only bit of potentially good news he had, though, since, alive or dead, they were trapped by the closed, unpowered hatch of the Night Walker. After enough squirming, he was able to work his sidearm las pistol out of its holster, and managed to painfully haul himself all the way up to the closed door. The young guardsman felt around for anything he could use to manually open it, but nothing he pulled, twisted, or tugged on had any effect, and having felt around the rim of the doors, he doubted anything would. The Knight was crushed in around the door itself, and even if there was some kind of emergency release, it would not shock him at all if it simply would not function after all the damage the machine had suffered. He considered his weapon, wondering if there was some way to shoot himself out before laughing grimly at himself. Well, there was one way he could shoot his way out of this situation. Out of any and every situation, in fact, save the Emperor's judgment. But he was not eager to explore that option. Maybe, if it seemed he would be consigned to starving to death in this darkness, but not yet. After all, he still needed to find out what happened to the 2 surviving members of his squad, needed to know if they had gotten Gala to the Medicae in time.
Alright. Ronnie, stand in front of your own fish cannon, my good man. You deserve to be purged.
It was as he was thinking, otherwise silent in the darkness, that he noticed the noise. A soft, distant tapping. At first, he just assumed it was something innocuous, just some part of the environment, but something about the steady yet irregular rhythm of the taps bothered him. They sounded almost like Morse code. His heart beat hard as he realized what they might be, his brain churning as he tried to decipher the metallic taps in the dark. He had a harder time hearing, despite being quiet, his heartbeat pounding in his ears, but soon he got enough to work out a small portion of the message. It was Morse code. Someone was trying to communicate with him. Where was the tapping coming from? Was it coming from outside the night? Biting his lip in excitement and nervousness,
What is the tussle
Farnes
you're
began
talking
to work
about?
out the whole message, which he soon realized was being endlessly repeated.
Alarming conditions detected. Is aid required?
Was the message. Taking a deep breath, Farnes composed his own message in his head and then, with the muzzle of his sidearm, tapped it out. Identify yourself, was what he sent.
This is Buffin 337. Loyal servant of the machine god.
Was the message he got back. Farnes was almost dizzy with elation, beginning to tap back another message soon afterwards, being forced to stop and start 2 or 3 times in his excitement. Aid required, trapped inside, tech priest critically injured, need help ASAP. He clinked out with his gun. There was a pause then, before some more tapping answered him.
Understood. Stand by. Now seeking nearest aid.
Farnes nodded in the dark, gasping his relief and tapping back one last message. Understood. Standing by. Hurry. He got no reply to that, which was much as he expected. However, he was not idle while he waited. He did not know how much he could realistically do in his current position, but he was
Come
intent on
on.
finding out. If his experience in the locked chimera had taught him one thing, it was that nothing was as suffocating as helplessness. Nerva had been doing the bulk of the work, had been protecting him, protecting the Canoness, protecting the Imperium itself. Now, some way, somehow, it was his turn.
I'm loving the
He
artwork.
felt a flush of shame fill him for a moment as he remembered his suicidal considerations. Taken only moments before
That's
encountering
middle for
Beaufort.
my tea.
That's no way for a guardsman to think. He scolded himself in the darkness, gripping his weapon with a new conviction. He would make sure they both got out of this mess. Farnes swore he would not rest until they were both back with the Imperium proper, and out of this metal tomb. He would do whatever he could, however he could, or he would perish in the attempt of it. And the first step to that was working
He was
out how
calling
to
about
get
the
out of
Knight's
here.
extended warranty.
It was his turn to stand, and with Bofin's help, he hoped he'd at least have the dignity to die standing, as opposed to locked in a dead mechanical demigod.
General Windu's here now. Let's go.
Mace Windu stood within a tall spire, the room he now commanded having been converted into a forward command post from a hollow network media center. A hollow projection table, several stations, and many large pieces of communications equipment had been brought in and set up. He leaned over the table, viewing with clarity the battle now taking place in the crushed avenue leading up to the Basilica. The blue units of the 501st poured down like a purifying flood from the top of the crashed dreadnought, hitting all sides of the red-lit surviving Imperial forces just as the withdrawn troops who had surrendered the avenue suddenly returned, catching the Imperials between them. To add to that, crowds of yellow combatants were charging up from several of the larger adjoining roads. Axumite freedom fighters, from the looks of it, and they were hammering into the Imperials hard from 3 separate sides. Though one of these 3 mobs seemed far more effective than the others. He watched as it enveloped and devoured several Imperial forces which had managed to fight their way off the main road, cutting through their normally resilient defenses with speed. But it was not long before their canny enemy began some kind of effective recovery, the Basilica gates flying open as reserve soldiers poured out, lancing into groups of clones and rebels in order to extract those they could from the clutches of death. Windu helped to organize the counter-offensive from this omniscient position, but even so, the Imperial rescue team still managed to stall their advance long enough to rescue many otherwise doomed Imperial forces, all of them retreating into the gates of the Basilica compound. Mace ground his teeth
Quipper, he
together
probably
as he
does.
observed it. Despite their earlier bombardment, the walls still stood, and the grounds within them were heavily fortified. "Should we prepare our forces for an assault, General?" asked the clone commander who stood to Windu's right. He shook his head, looking at the trooper, one of Ayla's men, his armor chipped in some places, blackened in others. The room was mostly lit by the shine of computer consoles, and what sunlight managed to make it through the line of windows which created one wall of the room, most of them already cracked or partially shattered. The Jedi Master sighed heavily, leaning forward over the holographic battlefield and closing his eyes for a moment. "No, assaulting now will only bleed us even more. Find out if those Axumites have a leader, and get me in contact with them if they do. We need to coordinate with them if it is possible. Have our forces surround the Basilica. Either we are settling in for a siege, or we are containing them to the temple grounds until the rest of the Order arrives." Mace said, the clone saluting as the doors leading into the room slid open.
Now, they were out there partying, and they still haven't taken the Basilica. I'm just sitting here going, oh God, this is just they need to get on the ball, because if they don't take out the Basilica now, they're gonna have a lot more problems they can deal with.
Permitting Ahsoka Tano and Captain Rex to stride inside.
Hey, Ahsoka
The
Tano's here.
ex-Jedi stood straight, hands folded behind her back as her eyes met Windu's from across the hologram projecting table. Both warriors now marked by the battles they had endured. Rex himself was no less worse for wear, his armor chipped and singed in several places, a few flakes falling off as he snapped a crisp salute. "Commander Tano, Captain Rex, it's good to see you are both safe, and though your entrance was a bit dramatic for my tastes, I cannot argue with your results. Well done," he said, his face softening as he regarded the former Padawan. Seeing her now, Mace felt a pang of remorse for his and the Council's hasty decisions surrounding her trial. She had the makings of a true Jedi, strong in form and spirit, and that strength shone through now as she stood wreathed in the glory that came from being the one who rescued the entire assault. Ahsoka Tano, the ex-Jedi student of the Chosen One, still holding strong long after so many others within the Order had fallen or lost the strength to go on. He was coming to understand that her departure from the Order was a larger loss than he and the others had been willing to admit at the time, and one he hoped would prove ultimately temporary. "Same to you, Master Windu. I was afraid that seeing you here would mean that we had lost the shipboard contest, but it looks like most of the Order is still standing," she said, gesturing to the Jedi around them, many of whom were
Standing is
helping
an
to
operative
coordinate
word.
the clones as they enveloped the Basilica. "We disabled their vessel, for the most part. Doing any more would have demanded a higher price than I was willing to pay. Besides, we may have come back with an even larger prize in the destruction of one ship. But never mind that for now. How are your men doing? I can see even from here that you are not without your own
That's
losses,"
true, Audit. That's very
said
true.
Master Mace Windu. Ahsoka nodded, and Rex stepped forward, projecting their numbers in a report displayed from his wrist-mounted holoslate. "Right you are, General. Taking the ship was no mean feat, and we did still lose some men in the crash. All in all, however, the 501st is ready to help reinforce a Star Corps wherever we are needed. Hope you don't mind, but some of our men have been a little proactive when it comes to upgrading our equipment. Many are using droidman weapons we took while reclaiming the ship," the clone informed. Mace nodded, waving his hand as though it were the essence of unimportant. "As long as they're still firing for our side, I don't care what guns your men use. We are currently moving to seal the Imperials inside their fortress while we wait for the other half of the Order to arrive. Once gathered, we will crush them with a single decisive strike. It will be over before they even know it has begun," said Mace. "If that is the goal, then we should get some clones to work on sapping locations beneath the enemy temple. Here, and here would be the best locations," Ahsoka said, gesturing to a section of the massive city platform that held the Basilica and its surrounding structures up.
Yeah.
The image zoomed in to display the breaching locations she was
Skitarii
indicating
weapons.
towards. "When we attack the gates, most of their forces will be drawn to more defensible locations, and they may not notice holes appearing in these places. If we set up just right and time the intrusions with the main assault, we might be able to smuggle a battalion or two of clones behind their perimeter before they even realize there has been a breach.
I
She
doubt that. You
advised.
got Kriegers there.
Mace looked on approvingly, rubbing his chin for a moment before giving her a sharp nod. That is good thinking, Commander. I'll get some clones on it as soon as I can. I assume some of your men would be up to it? Mace asked, and Ahsoka nodded, though her face scrunched with thought for a moment. We may want to recruit some of those civilian militias then, the young warrior added, zooming the display out and then pointing down into the holographic map at the yellow-colored forces. We may not otherwise have enough men to do it all. I agree my forces should set up the breaching locations, but if they do, there may not be enough of the 501st to completely seal in the enemy. However, if we can co-opt some of these rebel forces, then we should have more than enough to encircle them, she said. Windu looked and nodded, but seemed a bit confused, brows scrunching at her words. I intend to look into that. However, I am perplexed by your concern. I know your forces were mauled by the Imperials in orbit, but do you really have so few men left under your command? The Jedi Master asked, the ex-Padawan nodding her head solemnly. Yes, the Imperial droidmen did not make it easy for us. On top of
Mechanicus.
that, I'm forced to hold a portion of my forces back to guard our prisoners. She explained, causing Windu to raise his eyebrows. Prisoners? He asked. She nodded again, more forcefully. Of course, they aren't actually droids. Both on the ship and in our counter-assault on the main road, I've ordered my troops to use their stun setting to take as many prisoners as possible. Our recent offensive has racked up a pretty large prisoner count, she said, crossing her arms lightly and sounding pleased with herself. Windu scowled softly and sighed much more heavily, shaking his head and rubbing his face with a thickly calloused hand. Ahsoka, we cannot contribute any more of our forces to secondary objectives at this time. Every trooper is needed to... Mace began to say. Secondary objectives? Ahsoka asked, speaking the words with a huff of humorless laughter, as though she could not believe what she was hearing.
She can't.
Yes, secondary objectives. Our primary objective is the subduing of the remaining armed and active Imperial forces on Axum. If we are to break through the Basilica's defenses, we need every Jedi and every trooper ready to do their part, not guarding an expanding pool of war criminals. He said sternly, Master, how are we going to come to a reasonable understanding with these people if we do not even bother to take prisoners? More than half the intel I've gained on them came from one discussion I've managed to have with one of their priests. A priest I captured. Besides, what exactly do you want me to do with the prisoners I do have?
Kill them?
Let them go to rejoin the enemy? She asked, shaking her head and crossing her arms more
It
tightly.
hasn't even crossed his mind.
Obviously not,
Crossed her mind.
said Windu. So what? Execute them? Defenseless prisoners? Do I even need to remind you that doing that is not our way? Ahsoka snapped. Look, Tano, just do not take any more prisoners. We can recover any wounded that survived the battles, or any who surrendered to us, but outside of that, no more. That is an order, the Jedi Master said in a low voice.
The Jedi are learning good times rhymes with war crimes. Yes.
His patience grinding thin. But, Ahsoka began, this is not a debate. You have your orders, Commander.
Ooh.
I expect you to follow them.
Uh-oh.
He almost yelled, slamming his fist down on the table and causing the holograms to flicker. Ahsoka flinched back and then scowled angrily. She grit her teeth and turned back towards the door with an indignant posture, walking away. Where are you going? Mace called at her back. To help my men in securing the Central Avenue, sir, she said over her shoulder before slamming the door button, causing it to hiss and slide open, permitting her to exit. Come on, Rex, she snapped.
Yeah, you see, the thing about it is, the fun part I find about how the Jedi, they talk about, oh, you know, we're so noble and peaceful and blah. No, you are just as screwed up as anybody else. You just, have a better way of justifying your actions. But Ahsoka, I love how Ahsoka just shit on him, because he really did deserve it.
The clone captain saluted to Mace Windu once more, before pursuing Ahsoka out the door, the two walking out beside a third party that was entering just as they left. This newcomer was escorted by 2 clones to either side. The odd alien leering at Ahsoka, who cringed away from the creature as she passed, soon out of sight.
I heard you were looking for me. Well, look no further, Master Jedi.
Hissed this new figure who sauntered into the room. Mace blinked. The man who slid into his command center was unlike any being he had ever seen before.
No.
Tall and straight back.
No, if this art is any indication, hell no. Omega, thank you, Omega. Reasonable Ahsoka does not understand what she's dealing with. The Imperium is not reasonable. That's very true. But the Jedi, I've been saying this since the start of this. The Jedi are going to be just completely and totally damaged because of this war. It's going to damage them completely and totally. And you can see with Windu, it's happening. Windu is ordering the death of not droids, but people now. Yeah. So thank you, Omega. Oh, God, this is going to get bad.
With a
You are not part of the crew. You are sus.
large bald head, intelligent yellow eyes, and a handsome, if stretched, face, this newcomer strode as though he were the one granting an audience to the Jedi,
Damn
and
it.
not the other way around. Most shockingly of all was the man's 3 arms, his 2 right limbs appearing humanoid, whereas the left was composed of an enormous 4-digited taloned claw. I'm sorry? Have we met? I don't think I'm looking for anyone like you at the moment, Windu said, straightening to meet the man.
I'm the leader of the rebels. I could have sworn you wanted to see me to coordinate. Isn't that right?
The man asked with a serpent's smile.
Ricky says, should the Republic sacrifice its metaphorical soul to survive what's to come? No. It shouldn't. It shouldn't. Because the thing about it is, if they actually got their act together, they could drive the stuff off. What's up? What's up? What is this?
Remember the woman that we used to stud to?
Yeah?
Well, she has a friend who has some serious health issues,
Uh-huh.
who is downsizing her breeders. That is a 4-year-old male that she is getting rid of for the price of what we're selling our puppies for. I'm just letting you know.
Woman.
It
X in the chat to get the hospital off my case. Like, I'm the...
He's a chocolate and tan male named Thor.
Just...
Named Thor.
I heard you!
X in the chat for Thor.
Oh my god.
X in the chat for another pug.
Stop it! Alright. I do not think that the Republic should sacrifice its soul, because honestly, it could still fight back. They just have to actually do it. Abhuman the Scrug says, Gene still is working with the Jedi. Virus bombs now, please. Virus bombs before now, please. Just nuke it. Not even nuke it. Just grab another planet and throw it into this one. Let's just do that and be done with it. Thank you, Ricky. Thank you, Abhuman. Don't encourage her. Do not encourage her. Stop laughing. Who asked you? Nobody asked you. I'm back here watching important things. Yes. No, nobody's going to X in the chat for Thor. Nobody's Xing for Thor at all.
Coming to lean against the table. Mace nodded, quirking his eyebrows. You are the leader of all the rebels? He asked. Not quite, was the answer Mace got, but the rough rasp came not from the alien Windu had been talking to, but rather from yet another newcomer who was being escorted in by 2 more clones. This newly arrived man was huge, over 6 feet of hard, obvious muscles, wrapped in green work fatigues and a black trench coat which was torn, singed, and still smoking slightly. The black-haired man stared forward with hard, dark eyes, a burning cigarette held clenched between his pursed lips as he spoke out one side of his mouth. Unlike the rebel who was already in the room, this man seemed entirely human, though no less confident in his demeanor. Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi,
Oh boy,
is that
it's
right?
Sammy.
The man asked as he came to stand beside the table, looking down at the hologram projection that stood between them. Close. Master Kenobi is currently in the field. I am Jedi Master Mace Windu. And you are? Mace said, hiding any sign of annoyance as he controlled the growing headache he felt pounding in his head. Samael.
Oh
I'm
boy.
leading this group down here, said the burly man, pointing down towards the smallest of the rebel mobs, which had gathered towards the southern end of the battlefield. Mace nodded, noting the man's odd accent and soldier's bearing, before turning towards the other who had come before him. That is good to know. Here I was about to ascribe all these groups to one authority, Windu said pointedly. The alien shrugged dismissively, walking around the holotable and indicating towards the hologram of the battle. He gestured with his black talons towards the yellow group of rebels which had been destroying the Imperials they encountered with unusual effectiveness.
This is my group. I cannot speak for the others. That's the truth, I swear it.
He confessed mockingly. Mace looked down and scowled somewhat as he noticed which group the man laid claim to and what this group was doing. Good. Then as our first order of business, we can have you order these people to pull back. If they keep charging up towards the Basilica, they are going to run headfirst into the Imperial weapons batteries. Those weapons will, Mace began to say, pointing at the advancing
Sam's
yellow
not a
forces
blank.
who were even then chasing the retreating tail of the...
Okay, so let me put an end to this theory that Sam's a blank or there are blanks. If there was a blank nearby, two things would happen. One, Mace Windu would not be carrying on a conversation with it. Mace Windu would instinctually hate it flat out. Being in the presence of a blank is painful to anyone that is a psyker of any sort. So to a Jedi, they would feel the same way. At best, they'd feel a weakening, and they'd have an instinctual dislike of the blank. At worst, they'd be in agony, and they'd absolutely hate them. Yes, remember Anakin. The Jedi would notice that something was very, very wrong with this person. So it cannot be a blank. It would be instantaneous. As soon as he got within a certain number of feet of them, they would instinctively hate him. And everybody, like, he wouldn't be this, he wouldn't have any charisma to speak of, because most people that he would run into would automatically dislike and distrust him based off what he was. And that's not good for a spy.
The Imperium up towards the temple grounds.
We'll do nothing we cannot overcome if your Jedi warriors rip them off the walls.
Ricky, no, they can't be trained to
Fall
suppress their
upon them
abilities.
with your power swords.
The alien man interjected in the midst of Windu.
The only ones that have that level of control over their blankness, it comes with the help of technology, and that would be the Colossus assassins. They're the only ones that can really, really put a dampener on it, but that comes from a lot of technology.
Sentence.
Now is not the time to hold back. The Imperials are off balance, demoralized. We need to strike them now.
Jedi.
Relentlessly and without pause. We need to rub them out until they no longer exist.
None of you think Slaneshi thoughts from that. I know some of you went there. I know some of you went there. I know at least 4 of you that went there.
Mace raised his hand to stall him, looking towards the human counterpart to the alien rebel. What do you think? He asked. The man
Jedi.
shook his head, swiveling a line of smoke in the air as he did, reaching up to take the smoldering tube from his mouth as he spoke. We press on now. We might win, but the cost will be massive. Even if you knock out those emplacements, This is a layered wall with
X is in the Chattanooga Cobbett.
pillboxes lined all throughout. The kill zones on these segments will drown us in weapons fire and our own blood. The human rebel pointed out, awkwardly waving at the holotable until it caught his movements and zoomed out, displaying the entire starburst-shaped structure of the walls. Mace nodded and turned to the alien leader, gesturing towards the holographically highlighted defensive measures.
Prophet says, I actually didn't ask, even now I'm not. Heretic.
Which dotted the
Thank
entirety of the spiked configuration.
Thank you,
Attacking now
Prophet.
will only mean bleeding ourselves on their defenses. I have around 2,000 more
You
Jedi
need
Knights
to
en
attack
route.
them
They
now.
will be here in as little as 6 hours.
Wait, how many?
I intend to wait for them before making any offensive moves against that fortress. Mace explained, firm but calm. The human adopted a thinking posture, but nodded his head somewhat while the three-armed man hissed in obvious displeasure. Sounds like a sound.
Omega,
Samuel
you're
started to
very
agree.
correct.
I will not give them rest. Their death is within our grasp. Yes, we shall all bleed, but our blood will drown them. Don't you see?
The odd alien insisted. Listen, Mr. Mace began to say.
Joseph.
He snapped out in response. Jalsop, if you choose to attack them now, you will attack them alone, and you will not succeed. Calm down and give your people time to rest and regroup. When they attack again, they will do so with the Republic's full support. But that time is not now. Windu explained calmly.
Foolish.
Just kill it!
I've already ordered my broodkin to assault the walls. Cutting them back now will only mean taking fire as we retreat.
The alien man contested. Still less losses than you'll take if you commit. The human leader added.
Oh boy.
We are at war. Losses are inevitable. All that matters is that we earn something for those whom we lose. Retreating earns us nothing.
Jolson snapped back. Losing everything to win a battle is foolish if we intend to win the war. Windu interjected.
Not from a Tyrannus point of view.
Let us not be wasteful with the lives under our command. Wait. He said, suddenly pausing, eyes darting as a subtle sense brushed across his mind.
Winning this battle could well start the winning of this war.
Jolsop began to say, cut off a moment later by a frantic wave of Windu's hand. The Jedi Master craned his head as if trying to listen, and several of the other Jedi stopped working as well, suddenly paused and silent as they looked about. A few moments passed before, suddenly, Windu's eyes snapped wide open, his hands extending out to cast a sudden expansion of the Force between all the men present around the table, throwing himself and the two others away. Almost the very instant after he did this, the roof above them caved in under the force of a shaped charge. The explosion shattering the holotable into pieces. The clones and Jedi in the room snapped around to face the sudden disturbance, falling straight into their assailants' hands as flash grenades fell out from the smoking hole above them. Each one held and cooked to detonate just as they reached the halfway point between the ceiling and the floor. The bright flashes blinded the unprepared inhabitants of the command center as men and more grenades came down.
Well, hello there.
The round weaponized canisters
FBI, open up!
to the men who had dropped them, spewing disorienting smoke into the air as the blinded Jedi and clones tried to blink vision back into their eyes. Meanwhile, all around them, more ceiling charges exploded, all following a similar pattern, dropping smoke grenades from the newly created holes before following them up rapidly with the visored soldiers of the Tempestus Scions.
Yeah.
Their aided sight cut through the smoke they deployed into, and their advanced training and lethal armaments did the rest, firing through the haze and cutting down most of the Jedi and clone troopers in the room.
Oh my
None
god.
but the very best survived the initial attack, and nearly all were forced to dive behind whatever cover they could manage to find for themselves. Mace Windu, however.
Okay, so You have the so just for Star Wars fans that do not know what the Tempestus Scions are, you have the Imperial Guard. Then you have in the Imperial military it works kind of like this. You have the PDF. Then you have the Imperial Guard. Then you have the Regiments of Renown, which is very specialized. Then you have at about the same levels. Between the two levels, you have the Cadians. Now, the Cadians and some of the other Regiments of Renown are like legitimately the best. And then up here, you have the Tempestus Scions. And that's what's attacking them right now. It's the Special Forces of the Special Forces. SEAL Team 6, SEAL Team 6.
Sought no such protection. He didn't even draw his blade, diving straight into the attacking Scions with his bare, force-wreathed fists.
I saw Hobbit.
Mace was a master among masters, and had already had clone medics remove the most troublesome of his
Regiment of Renown.
welts, blocking out what pain
Regiment of Renown,
remained as
Dart.
he pumped his fist into them. Each strike was like the blast of an autocannon loaded with armor-piercing rounds, save for the fact that Windu's limb was far larger than any bullet those guns fired. His knuckles blew bloody chunks out of the soldiers he encountered, their fellows maneuvering to swathe him in lethal crossfire, but never moving quite fast enough. Yet, despite the inability of the central squad of Scions to gain control over their engagement with the Jedi Master, the other breaching squads and those who followed in after them made short work of most who remained.
Oh my
Something
God.
Windu was powerless to stop. The Jedi were well trained in how to deflect incoming projectiles, and indeed, the Imperial lasboat was just as susceptible to an intercepting lightsaber blade as any shot taken from a blaster. And yet they moved much faster, throttling through the air at the speed of lethal light, as opposed to the much slower pace the bolts lobbed at Jedi from blasters moved at, requiring highly honed reflexes and precognitive mastery from those who sought to block any volley coming from even a single source. And each Jedi and clone found themselves not randomly targeted and shot, but rather the victims of systematic cross and focus fire. The effects were nearly decisive, with all the clones and most of the Jedi dying in the room within moments, with only a few significant holdouts. The human rebel leader, Samael, rolled behind cover and barely managed to evade the sprays of lethal death coming from the few stormtroopers who had homed in on him, while the alien rebel proved far more proactive. Jolsop bounded off the floor in instant recovery after he was repulsed from the center of the room, his movements smooth and predatory, like a Nexu unleashed in the middle of the fight. Where Mace used the Force to enact his impossible physical feats, Jolsop relied on pure foreign physicality. Alien muscles pulsated.
No one, don't even start with that. Creed is not here. If he had, the Bane Blade would have shot Mace Windu from the potted plant. Okay?
Carapaced flesh swelling and contracting as he ran through the smoke, his inhuman senses making up for any mundane eyesight the obstructions denied him. With the precision and speed of a striking hawk, the gene-thieving alien plunged its clawed hand through the armored chest of the nearest Scion, ripping through the gun the soldier raised to shield himself as though it were but paper. His gore-laden talons exited in a torrent of red, ripping free the Imperial's still beating heart and throwing it into the face of the next, blinding the Scion just as he lined up shots on the rebel leader. Together with the Jedi Master and the few other survivors of the command post, Jolsop began to swiftly return to the Scions the death they had been so eagerly dealing. And in moments, more clones and Jedi were shoving into the room, weapons out and looking
alien. I
for
noticed that,
targets. The Scions and their Tempestor Prime were being boxed in, the Imperials backing away towards the wide windows which formed one wall of the room, firing in desperate sprays of strobing lasbolts as they tried to stop the two foes who were tearing through their lines like tinfoil. Moving swiftly, they put their backs to the glass, and then, surprisingly, threw themselves out. Glass shattered, fragments reflecting the sun as they toppled from the side of the endlessly tall spire. Mace and several Jedi and troopers running to the jagged windowsills to see with their own eyes what the Imperial commandos would do.
Couple of
Their
headshots.
heads were forced back into the building. A few clones and one Jedi not withdrawing fast enough, craniums and faces bursting apart in volleys
Boom.
of light. The imps had fallen only a short distance into the waiting, open side doors of 4 impossibly parked Torox Primes, the wheeled vehicles adhering magnetically to the side of the building. It was from their turret guns that the lethal covering fire came, the wall-crawling vehicles remaining for only as long as it took to secure their passengers before driving off at a furious speed across the side of the building.
Ridiculous.
Clones protruded out to fire at their backs, and other Jedi began to scatter
Just
to give
ridiculous.
chase through the spire, calling for more troops as the smoke in the destroyed command post leaked out through the windows and into the burning sky.
Boom
Mace
shakalaka.
stood, face hard and lined with sweat, heart pounding in his chest as he looked out, watching the Imperials flee. He stepped away, glass crunching under his boot as he turned, raising an eyebrow as he regarded the alien leader of the Axumite rebels. His body revealed more and more as the smoke vacated
Stop it, no one.
the room. He lay upon the shard-studded ground, his face fixed in a vicious grin, gore-colored claws stretched out before him. Jolsop was dead, having been killed just before the end of the engagement, but not by any of the Imperial agents who had assaulted them. At least, not the ones in the armor. The strange alien man had a large molten wound cutting down through his spine. A wound which looked suspiciously like that left by a lightsaber, or something similar. Turning to face the room fully, Mace could see much being revealed, but even after all the smoke had cleared, one feature remained absent. The other rebel
Samuel.
leader, the human Samael, was gone. Had he fled in the chaos? Run away during the attack? It was a reasonable assumption, Mace knew. His eyes swung slowly back to the dead alien leader, whom he had been fighting alongside only a few moments ago, who had died right under the Jedi Master's nose. It was also reasonable to assume that the obvious Imperials were not the
Not a
only
plasma gun.
Imperials that were there. Troopers began to move through the room, securing what they could, beginning to replace most of what was there, and nervously watching Master Windu as he approached the dead rebel, and kneeled by his side, looking more closely at his wound. While it superficially resembled a lightsaber's cut, it was obvious to the Master that this
Ricky says the Jedi are going to need to loosen their recruitment standards if they're going to want to replenish their numbers in time for the next battle. Somebody once told me the world was... yeah, they're going to have to. Thank you, Ricky. But they're not going to be able to. What do I think this was? Okay, it's either some sort of power weapon that we just don't see him having on him, which wouldn't be surprising, or it was a digi weapon. So we'll see.
damage did not come from any typical lightsaber configuration. The burn was almost jagged, while remaining mostly precise, as though the blade had been flickering and fluctuating when the blow had been struck. Windu stood back up, frowning deeply. How had the Imperials discovered this location? How had they managed to scout it and strike so effectively without being caught or noticed at some point? More and more, the evidence was pointing
All right,
in
fan,
one
you have
direction.
a wonderful night, bud.
Trooper, locate the other rebel leader, the man named Samael, and bring him to me.
You're not
Master
gonna
Windu said,
find him.
snapping the order off to one of the nearby clone commanders. The man nodded. Aye, will do, General. What are we bringing him in for? He asked. Mace Windu shook his head, rubbing his chin as he sighed heavily out from his nose, turning to face the broken and now ruined holotable. Nothing yet. I've just got a bad feeling about him.
Ah! Okay, so. Alright, I have a thing. 1 second. Thing popped up right there. Okay, Eric. Okay, great. Let's see. 1 second. Now, I'm going to click off this real quick just to sit there and check something. Make sure I don't have something going on. All right. It just started to, okay. Okay, so, here's what I'm going to do, okay? I will, yeah, I'm going to definitely listen to the credits. It's going to take me a second, because what I'm going to do is, I'm going to hopefully not get this stream shut down by doing this, but I'm gonna have to cut the last part of this out of the actual stream. So, future me, make sure to trim to this point. There we go. Let's listen to the credits. Here we go. I need to get 1313 back in here, so I'm gonna pause this, and I'm gonna tell you guys right out of the gate that this has been a very enjoyable series. It has been enjoyable since the moment I started it. It's been enjoyable since, like, you guys came in here. This has just been fun. I can't wait until the next one comes out. I have enjoyed doing this stream every single time just because of how much fun it has been to do this. To have everybody around. To be able to nuke Profit in chat just makes me happy. In any case, I'm going to go ahead and bring the stream down, bring it to a close. Thank you all for joining me. Be sure to go to the original if you haven't already. Pop a like in there. And, yeah, one of the main reasons I love doing this kind of stuff is because I get to sit around and it's not just me. I get to watch it with all of you. And some of you guys are just like chomping at the bit, just desperately trying not to say something and waiting. And I love that. I love the thing where everybody's like, here it is, and stuff like that. And when a big plot point comes in, like, yeah. Thank you, Meet Meet. Meet Me says, do you plan on separating the Exploring Series SCP playlist into its own schedule? Just wondering how that's going, or if you plan to figure that out around the time you finish up the request block. Meet Me, that's probably going to be sometime between here or there. I don't know which one. I have no idea which one. It's something that I have to really take into consideration, because the thing I'm doing with, like, everybody wants to see the Exploring Series, and the only problem with that is that there's so much stuff from him. There's so much stuff from the Exploring Series. And right now I'm watching one or two videos of them every 2 to 3 days. If I made a series out of it, that would drop off hard. So I got to figure out how, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. But for right now, I don't know if that's going to happen. But thank you, Meet Me. In any case, Burb, I'm sorry, bud. I'm really sorry. Yeah, it is a commitment, but at the same time, it's a good commitment. At the same time, it's something where SCP is so massive, and I'm just dipping my toe into it. What percentage of the request block are you going to go there before opening the request tab? 100%. Right now, I'm just trying to get it underneath 100, and then I'm gonna think from there. Thank you again, Meet Me, and I hope you have a great night too. You have a wonderful night, bud. Ricky, the request tab is going to stay closed until I can get it at least below 100. Then I may reopen it. I may not. I don't know yet. Right now, it is. There are so many things that is just impossible to really get into. And if I reopened it, I'd be right back at 160 before I even blinked. The request list does do that. I just what I want to do is when I make some new rules, I want to make it to where everybody's gotten their things seen as per the old rules, versus what I'm going to do when I do it. In any case, I'm going to dive out, guys. There's still 46 people in here. It's crazy to me. I can't believe that. You guys have a wonderful night, no matter what you do, and I hope you guys have a good day tomorrow. I'll be back with regular reactions tomorrow, and hopefully soon I'll be putting out some more stuff for you guys as far as 5-ish minute lore, something a little bit different than what I've used to do. And I'll actually, if you guys are here, if you guys want to come for another live stream, I'll actually be on Thursday, most likely, unless something changes, for shenanigans again. Okay, Ronnie. We'll catch you guys next time. You guys have